What happens when school leaders courageously embrace vulnerability, listen to their staff, and implement restorative practices? Our guest again this episode is Wayne Davies, Instructor and Director of Student Teaching, Faculty of Education, University of Winnipeg in Manitoba. Hi there, I'm Stan Baker, one of the hosts of Circle Forum, along with Shelley Steele and Steve Young. Learn from your mistakes. That's what we teach our students and principals too. Learn and grow from mistakes as leaders by embracing vulnerability and acknowledging mistakes, and then using them as stepping stones for growth.
This podcast episode is brought to you by Making It Right, which originated from Indigenous traditions and prioritizes repairing harm, restoring relationships. It focuses on accountability and empathy rather than punishment. Making It Right reflects a relational worldview where harmony within relationships and the community is prioritized over individual actions. It underscores the idea that mistakes are opportunities for growth, not just for the individual who erred, but for everyone involved. The process of addressing harm collaboratively can strengthen relationships and create a more resilient school community.
Check out our website, www.restorative.ca, for school resources for principals to lead in making it right. Let's join your hosts, Shelley, Steve, and me, Stan. We often talk about to our kids, students, our own kids, well, you have to learn from your mistakes, right? But as adults, we have a lot of difficulty with that idea. First of all, that I make mistakes, and secondly, that I have to learn from it. Are there mistakes that you've made as a leader that you'd be willing to share, and how did it change your practice? And if you can keep it down to 20 or 25, that would be the best way.
Okay, they still talk about the rooftop picture in Selkirk, the Robert Smith Elementary. There's teachers there that will, no matter where they will the rest of their career, because I actually had one of them come in, speak at a university course I was doing, and I just said those words, and she started laughing, but turned red. So first year principal, I want to multitask. It's field day, the infamous field day. I know we need to get a couple more fire drills done, and we have the rooftop photo. Guys showed up unexpectedly. So at the end of lunch hour, I call a fire drill, and we line up in front of the school, and we do the rooftop picture. You know how you always have to check the photo later for the kids giving you the finger? We had to check for all the staff, actually, because they were so freaking mad at me. Some of them didn't talk to me for a week. So it was just because I caught them totally off guard. It was just, they were hot, and it was terrible. So anyways, one of the things I did was I read Emotional IQ by Goleman. And so what I did at the end of that year is I gave my staff a couple of different ways, one anonymous and one non-anonymous ways to give me feedback on what I could do better and what are the issues and everything else. And I sat with them for 2 hours and went through with 35 or 40 people. They all got a chance to take a chew. And all I did was took notes. And 7 points came out of it. And that formed my 7 points going forward. And one was to talk to them before I did anything and consult unless it's an emergency. That was a mistake. I also, and I write about it in my book, I thought I could move a student to make things better for that kid. And then another parent called and said, I want my kid moved as well. And I said, no. And then she said, was it because that kid lives in the house next to your mom and shovels your mom's driveway? Because it's a small town, man. I was screwed. I was absolute. So I had to just say, I have made a mistake. And it wasn't because of that, but the optics were so bad. Right. So I read about that in the book. And so I had to come out, and I came out to staff. And I know there was one time in a staff meeting, I got short with a person, and I stopped the staff meeting, and I publicly apologized to that person and asked for their forgiveness. And it cut a lot of slack with the staff to see their principal be human, but to admit I'd screwed up.
It's a natural lead into what were some of the things you did as a principal to change a school from a fairly punitive culture to one where let's make things right?
Yeah. So my second school I was principal of, a really fantastic principal was before me. and was working really hard on restorative practices and was sending people to the workshops, and was the theoretical part was all there, but they weren't buying. They weren't buying. It was a tough school. It was a tough situation. And then I came in. I was the 5th principal in 8 years. I had the 5th vice principal in 8 years. So we were a new combination. Luckily, I pulled him off the staff, the teaching staff, so he had real insight, and they were cheering for him. And I taught there and been a student there. And that fall, there was lots going on. At any point in the office, there was 8 kids waiting to be disciplined. There was 53, I think, kids we tracked who were smoking right across the street from us every day. There was lots and lots of challenges. And so the way discipline worked for the most part was a lot of kids would get sent home, suspended for 3 to 5 days. They'd go home and rest. They'd eat. They'd play video games. And the teacher that they'd crapped on was still working, getting more and more tired, getting more and more frustrated. And they weren't really getting their pound of flesh out of it. I started with a few teachers. I started saying, I'd like to just have you talk to the kid. I want the kid to talk to you. And kids did not want to talk to the teacher. They thought that was a bigger punishment than anything. And we started just calling it making it right, based on the same restorative practices idea. And quickly we changed the school, like so fundamentally changed, because it is very hard to tell a teacher to F off if you have a relationship with them. But it's equally hard for a teacher to poke the bear when you have a relationship with that kid. And that was one of the things that did come out, was there was a lot of situations where everybody had to own their crap. And like when the situation starts with, I was just joking around, and then the student freaked out. Whoa, timeout. That isn't joking around to them. You're an adult that they care about, and your perspective matters. And when you say crappy things to them, they're going to respond. And anyways, yeah, that started the ball rolling.
So would that be done in like a reentry meeting? How formal would that be? Would you do it before they came back? What did that look like when they were making it right with that teacher?
So unless it was unless they really needed to go home, they didn't. I either did in-house, where I would, and if it was in-house, they would come to me, and because sometimes they needed to be out of the milieu for a little bit. And I would say to them, no, you're going to do 2 days or 3 days with me. However, if you don't jerk around with your washroom breaks, if you don't jerk around coming in late or leaving early, and if you get work done, I'll cut that down by quite a bit. And that is a heavy motivator for kids. Hope is a massive determinant on anything else. So if you tell a kid, no matter what you do for the next 3 days, you are in my office, why would they?
Yeah.
But if you tell them you could be out of here in 2 days, if you cut a whole day off, oh, I got hope. And so all of a sudden, that's we had to buy them in. So a lot of times we got to the point where we would do it immediately. Kids would not go home. They would go, they would have they screwed up. We would sit with them. A really good example was I had two young ladies who thought it'd be funny to blow up a condom and with some water in it and throw it in this teacher's room while she was trying to teach and run away. What happened was when they ran away, they ran right to the video camera. So I had them like this laughing, and both of them totally. So I called them to the office and I turned the camera on, and they're like, oh my God, how many days are we getting? I said, none. We're going to work it out. And they were like, so anyway, the coolest part was I sent them back. I said, you guys go straighten this out, make it right. I'm going to watch it on videotape from here. I don't have any sound, but I watch. So those two kids went. They asked her if they could speak to her in the hallway. She can. I'd already talked to her, so that was the other thing. I would never surprise anybody or force any of my staff, just like I wouldn't force kids. And so she came out, and you see them, and all of a sudden I'm looking, and my secretary and I are standing there, and we're watching. All of a sudden they're hugging, and I'm like, "What the hell?" And then later on, those kids ended up making their grade 9 farewell dresses with her.
Fantastic.
So you gave them the skills, and then you provide the opportunity with support to be able to use those skills. And as we've talked about before, we've seen kids as young as kindergarten, grade 1. If they're provided with the language and the skills, they can start to do that work, sometimes needing the adult support, but often they are moving far enough along that they can do that and then call the adult in for the pieces that they need. Yeah.
And you just said something really important. We're trying to create adults.
Yes.
We're trying to grow them to us and
That's
hopefully do a better job.
That's right.
So if Steve rolls in late to a podcast because something happened at home, you guys can be jerks and lock him out and tell him, Steve, no podcast for you for 2 weeks because you were late. Or
Right.
you can just say, dude, we started at 10:30. Where were you? I had something come up. I'm sorry. Okay. And that's the other thing. I never, ever made anyone say sorry.
No.
Because if it comes out naturally, genuinely, it's a bonus.
Right.
But most people, if you force them to do it, at best you're going to get a sorry, and it makes it worse. Like pouring gasoline on a fire.
Yes.
So yeah,
I think kids get this more readily than adults do.
Yeah.
How did you bring the adults along on this?
Again, to quote Steve, I think, Steve, you said something about the rocks, right? You water the flowers, not
watering the rocks. Yeah.
And so at staff meetings, we would talk about it, and I would have people share stories about, so how is it going with so-and-so? And they're like, oh, good. He's been in class. His marks are up. And people will be, what? And they're like, yeah, well, explain what's going on. We had this incident, we talked it out, but since then, me and him, it's been good. I throw him a granola bar every once in a while. And when he's hungry, because he'll tell me now, because he wouldn't before, now we're good. And all of a sudden you'd see other people like, huh. And they started doing it. And then they started talking to me about, I'd like to straighten this out with this kid. And I'm like, okay, I will help facilitate. And we were not, like, there's no papers are going to be written about that, because we were really not using any theoretical language, or we weren't.
You were building it into everyday language eventually, by the sounds of it. It's just the way we operate, right?
Yeah. If you park in my parking spot, I'm not going to, at the university, I'm not going to take you to the dean's office and say, we have to have a formal thing. Right. It's, Shelley, why'd you park my spot? Oh my God, I'm one spot over. I'm sorry. Here, I'll buy you a coffee, and can we get back? Yeah. Okay. Like, we move on with things, right? Yeah. Kids are capable of that.
Towards the end of my working time, I started doing an awful lot of, I'll say mediation, but facilitating conversations between staff members and adults who are in conflict in the building. And they started to see some value. And I always tell the story of the two that I just brought together in my office. And after a while, they said, can you please leave? We want to solve this ourselves.
Yeah.
And I had this vision of my office desk being flipped and all the rest. In half an hour, they're crying and they're hugging, and it all worked out. Have you ever sort of taken it to that next level with the adults and say, we need to do some work like we're doing with the kids, only between the adults?
Yeah, not to that level in terms of, but lots of conversations where people, because I couldn't, but people would reveal things like you said. A lot of times underneath there are way different things driving. They're not mad at you. No. They're mad at their partner. They're mad at their kids. They're mad at their car wouldn't start. They're mad at somebody else. But you are a nice, safe, easy place to blow up on. But I will say one thing about adults is there's actually two things, because you make me think of it, is one, building on-ramps for people that haven't gotten into it in the first place. On-ramps that allow you to keep dignity, right? I don't ever need anyone to publicly go like, Wayne, you were totally right. I'm sorry. I don't need that. I just need you to do what was good for kids, because it's not about me. It's what's good for kids. So having on-ramps for people to come in. The other one is, and I think this kind of goes back to you, Steve, is internal marketing. There's lots of research around that about companies that are in change. And in my doctorate, I talked about you have to do internal marketing. So you're constantly negating the negative talk with telling them all the good stories. And so when people see that, then all of a sudden they hear all these good stories, so they're a little bit more willing to try. And when you talk about this kid's problem wasn't that he was mad at you, it was just he was hungry, or dad left in the middle of the night and he doesn't know when he's coming back. You are a male, you are easy to blame or crap on or whatever. So you have to depersonalize it. And we had to do work around that. A couple of things I didn't mention that I probably should have when it comes to principals changing the context in terms of either their school or when it comes to Indigenous education is Martin Brokenleg and the circle of courage, massively important for my thinking and my work and what I've done. And when I say that the I is actually every kid, every staff member, every parent, every caregiver, every board member, every community member that has worked with me, because I haven't done anything by myself at all. It's always been a really big collective effort. When we changed Selkirk Junior High using electric guitars, essentially, it was a massive undertaking by everybody. It started very small, but it blew up to a really cool thing.
So it's just start with awareness, be prepared to move slow. And then I love the last two things that you said at the end was building the on-ramps. So how are people going to find their way in this? So make those on-ramps. That was a great analogy. And then of course, the internal marketing, keep going with the good stories, because there's going to be lots of people that want to throw all the buts at you. So have your good stories piled up. So thank you so much for that.
Thanks.
Making it right sounds so simple, yet it's so profound and so transformative in schools when staff and students see the change from a more punitive approach. Telling the story of changes for students, or internal marketing as Wayne Davies refers to it, engages the staff. It fosters collective ownership of the school and helps to overcome resistance to cultural changes in schools. Find out more about our work with Making It Right, using practical how-tos for listening and for building relationships at www.restorative.ca. Everyone needs an opportunity to make it right when they make mistakes. Adults, children, students, teachers, and principals. Let's get right on that and make it right.